Ghost stories? Nah, we don't. We don't really have anything like that around here. I mean, we do have the story of Jacob, but that's about as close as you're gonna get. You really want to know? Okay, well, I'm not supposed to tell you, but alright. Just no interrupting. I don't have the patience for that kind of crap. How to describe Jacob Emory? Well, I guess you could say he was the kind of guy you never really took any notice of. I mean, that isn't to say that he was a bad kid, not by any stretch. Many people in town actually thought he was the most reliable person for an odd job in the state. He just never really excelled at anything. He was the living proof behind the statement, Jack of all trades, ace of none. Most of this was due to his own lack of will, though. He dabbed in damn near everything this town could offer him. Automobiles, radio operations, store management, what have you. But he just never stuck with anything. His friends and workers went after him about it a number of times, but everybody got the same unsatisfying response. It just wasn't enough. Needless to say, any friends he kept were either very patient or just never spoke of the matter altogether. It was probably inevitable then that Jacob would have to leave and go abroad. Don't remember where he went, but I think Gertrude up the street remembered before she passed away. You'll have to scout out somebody else if you get curious. Any case, no one even tried to stop him. Everybody thought that a little travel would probably stamp the ambition out of him, or at least feed it to the point where it was no longer a problem. Hell, we even gave him a sending-off party, which, by the way, I thought was pretty nice of everybody. So anyway, he was gone for 6, 7 years? Can't really remember. You'll have to check with somebody else about that. Anyways, he came back eventually, and he'd changed, obviously enough. He'd been now amiable, energetic, all smiles all the time, and we all quickly learned why. He showed us a souvenir he'd brought back, a solid black stick, length of a pencil, the texture of chalk. We all wondered why on earth such a simple thing would prompt such a spring in his step, until he gave his demonstration. He took a piece of paper, and with the stick... God, there's got to be a better word for it. With this stick, he drew a crude circle. And the damn thing, it dropped and rested on the border of the paper, like a stone. Now, it didn't leave the paper, but it acted out on it. Sort of like an old movie projector for a screen. Now, son, I know how crazy that sounds, and if you feel like I'm playing silly buggers, then you can just leave an old fella to his craziness, but I know what I saw, even if everyone's been hushing up about it. And that stone he drew dropped. Jake even passed around the paper, and as it was being passed, it rolled around as the paper got turned. None of us had any words for it. Hell, what the hell was there to say? But he continued drawing, demonstration after demonstration. Stick figures in various pageants, plays, doing everything from fighting each other to making perfect human pyramids. And we all thought it was incredible. That was all the go-ahead he needed. He announced that he was going to put on shows to pay for his rent and food, where he could draw anything the crowd demanded of him. Now that we talked at length about. And he did eventually convince us that it would be completely safe. His drawings ethical, his practices lucrative and unique, and the attention would not go anywhere outside of the town's borders. Jesus, poor Jacob. If I'd not been so swept up in the moment, I might have read the signs right there and then. Saved that sorry son of a bitch by stepping in and stopping that terrible crap myself. But I was younger, we all were, and we saw no problem with encouraging him with what we all saw as an incredible experience to be shared with everyone else. Now, he didn't have any big radio or television connections, mind you, and the internet wasn't really a thing yet, so he did what all people did back in those days on a budget. He advertised his show with flyers. Now, flyers may not mean much to city folk like you, but in a small town like this, they gain a fair glance over, from time to time. And what's more, Jacobs managed to stick out by having these little figures jump up and down and whatever to get people's attention. Anyway, his first show must have gotten nearly 60 or so people, probably a lot more than that, and his shows were fantastic. Somebody would shout out a scene from a play or a comedy sketch, and Jacob's hand would just fly right over a white wall like a bird. He'd been holding back when he made that stone, that's for damn sure. His illustrations were all spot on, and he could make a damn near perfect human figure in minutes. Come to think of it, I don't actually remember any of his scenes taking more than 10 minutes to draw. They were all really well done too. Not only could you see a knight charge a castle, Jake would draw the castle's interior as well, like a wedding cake split down the middle, so you could see the knight scale the walls, fight his way through the levels to the dungeon, fight back out with the princess, and make a heroic leap off the castle onto the gateway below. Not realistic, no, but that was part of the appeal. None of us went in there expecting something real. When a scene or a sketch were finished, either the characters would leave off a wall or he'd cover the wall with white paint. This was good in a way. It gave the shows a time limit, so that when he was finished with all the 4 walls in the room, everyone knew that the show was over until the paint dried. Jake, meanwhile, was changing in a bad way. I mentioned that upon his return he'd been extremely energetic. Well, that energy, that vitality or fervour or whatever you damn well want to call it, it never left him. Not for an instant. Far from it. It seemed to grow in him. And he enjoyed it all too much. His eyes grew wider. He slept gratefully less over time. His statements and opinions more radical and frenzied, and though he never was a pushover, he was starting to make people nervous in his company. A month or two passed, and Jake's audience grew like a wildfire. Nearly everyone in the town paid to see Jake's art in action, and he had to rent out larger and larger places to facilitate all of them to sit. He now didn't stop after one scene was done. He moved directly onto the next, put on the next blank space of the wall, sometimes to the intriguing effect of making scenes mingle with each other, which the crowd bloody loved. The subject matter got more wild and immoral. The monsters got more bizarre and creative, the fighters using more impossible weaponry, all for the sake of the crowd's interests. Jake got steadily more indulgent, which we figured was from the money, and he became a drinker and a womanizer, neither of which got rid of that vitality, by the way. Some of those women claimed that they'd woken up in the middle of the night to see him scribbling with that stick on a drawing pad, a gigantic grin on his face. And whilst most of them said that they just assumed he was drawing them in the nude, there's rumours or two of them getting glances at that notepad. Those anonymous few supposedly said that those drawings absolutely weren't nude pictures, but neither of them, wherever they are, will say what he was drawing. Listen, kid, don't bother looking for those notepads or flyers. They're all gone now. Anyway, I'm getting off track. Point is, he was hitting the bottle. And that's important, because it was the drinking in the end that would eventually ruin everything. On the night of one of his audiences, as he walked in front of his cheering crowd, it was immediately apparent to everybody that he was completely shit-faced. Drunk. I was in the front row, and I could smell the bourbon on him from there. The show started. He went through a bunch of sketches and scenarios the crowd recommended, when at the end, someone asked that he draw himself. Oh, everyone cheered at that idea, and I guess they'd been wondering what his creations thought of him. And he eventually obliged. And no sooner had Jake finished connecting the two final lines of his coat, every single character across the vast, expansive wall stopped and looked directly at the illustration. Lovers stopped kissing. Clowns stopped laughing. Robots stopped fighting pirates. Everything stopped and looked at the Jacob illustration. The crowd died almost instantly. I remember Jake's face at that moment, pale, white, full of terrible comprehension of his mistake, and looking desperately for the cans of white paint that he'd forgotten to put out before the show. Everyone else? Well, they were looking at the fake Jacob. That Jacob reached inside his jacket pocket and pulled out a black stick of his own. And as we all watched, he drew a door. He pushed on his side, and the door swung open, allowing him to walk through onto the floor of the auditorium. The rest was absolute hellish pandemonium. People screamed and ran for the exits as Jacob's characters, both those currently on the wall and those which he had previously left before being covered up, ran out of their own exit. Throwing pies, shooting lasers, blowing fire and poison, and the impossible. I was near enough the exit to escape and gave only one backwards glance. The scene will haunt me forever. Jacob Emory was being dragged by his creations, kicking and screaming through the door his copy had made. The auditorium burned down, obviously enough, but I have no idea how many characters escaped, what happened to the fake Emory, or how many people died. The fire brought the fire department from all the nearby cities, and the fire department brought the police force, who in turn brought the government, who hushed up everything. They took the flyers and any art Jake had made and swore everyone to secrecy, or else. The fire was blamed on a cigarette in a garbage can during a basketball game, and we all just eventually went on with our lives. Officially, Jacob was made to have never existed. In retrospect, I realize everything. Jacob hadn't been creating illustrations. Illustrations don't move, much less act or attack. No, they're just images people see, shadows made to look like real things. Jacob had been making life, actual thinking things in some alternate, I don't know what you'd call it, dimension, using a power that was never meant to fall into mortal hands. He got drunk on that shit. His punishment was probably well deserved. Incidentally, the government screwed up on 2 different accounts. They did a damn good job silencing everyone, but proof remains. The ruins are still there, you know. The auditorium's ruins. I hear they're going to start reconstruction sometime soon, which will wipe out any remaining evidence someone can definitely see. But I went back there once, several years after the fire. Just once. And amidst the rubble, covered in ash, I saw something squirming. I looked closer. It was Jacob Emery's hand on the wall, exactly like it had been 3 years ago. Sweaty but calloused, I remember, but it was constantly flailing, as if the body it was supposed to be attached to was still whirling in flames. That was mistake number 1. Number 2 was those creations. Like I said, I don't know how many escaped, nor how many else the government agents found and caught, but I will say only this. Those tall grass meadows on the outskirts of town, don't go into them. Ever. If you choose to stay a couple nights in town or what have you, just remember, if you start seeing white figures, apparitions or what have you, I'll just say this. This town doesn't have ghost stories. G'day guys, I hope you enjoyed that story and thank you so much for giving it a listen. Remember, if you want some more scary stories, you can go to the Scary Stories for Late Nights playlist. Dusk Bowl has been a fantastic project to work on, and remember, if you've got any fanfic or fan art or any just questions about the series, feel free to email me at duskbowl.fm@gmail.com. I love every single one of you, and you've made being a microtuber probably one of the best experiences of my life. I want to give special thanks to my patrons, of course, being Lady Nevermore, Skulk Queen, Catherine Gordon, The Curator, and Stephen Stevens. If you see them in the comments, please say g'day. And to all of you, I bid you logs of love and shit shivers.